Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Experience Creators. I am so excited that you have joined us. My name is Carolene and I'm your host. And today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our next guest, Lindsay Miller. Lindsay is a rock star of a CEO, and she is currently the CEO and founder of Reverie, an incredible consulting firm of organizational development specialists working with small businesses. She is also an official member of Forbes Coaches Council. And today we are going to talk about company culture and employee experience as it pertains to small businesses. So if that is you, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, that you can learn from, that you can find valuable, then without further ado, let's dive into the interview. All right, Lindsay, welcome to the Experience Creators. It is such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the premiere month. So I'm very, very excited to have you here and to get into things in the next 30 minutes or so.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, let's dive straight in. And from your point of view, what are the elements that make up an incredible experience, an experience that you are going to remember until the end of time?
I love this topic. As you know, we've had a lot of conversation about it, and I really respect your work in this area. You are such an expert here, so it's fun to have these conversations with you. I think that for me, when I think about experience, especially in the workplace, right, comes down to community. Everybody wants to belong to something somewhere. So when you think of like really great sports teams or, like experiential things for people, they are a fan of whatever that is. They've got merchandise, they've got the colors, they've got, maybe whatever that brand or that symbol. They've got so many things that they can hold on to that are super tangible, and it creates a feeling within them. And honestly, I feel like that's something that I've been focused on so much in my career when looking at the workplace, is how do we create something that makes these just like crazy fans out of our clients and out of our employees. And I think there's just so much to be learned from these other industries in how they create an experience for their fans. So
Yeah.
I love this topic.
I love that. And one of the exercises that I go through with my clients, no matter who they serve, whether it's a live experience of, not so much now live experience, but virtual experience, no matter who their target audience is, but writing down how they want this cohort to feel once they've gone through that experience, and then using those maybe 3 to 5 adjectives and emotion words to actually guide how they're creating the experience. So the end goal isn't that big event and the kind of metric feedback that you get from that, but it's how do you make them feel? What is the look on their face as they walk away from that experience? What is the energy like, and how do they speak about that experience to their friends, families, and beyond? Because that is ultimately what's going to impact them the most, and what's going to create loyalty and awareness for what you're doing. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think what you were just talking about goes back to what I was saying about community that I didn't really I didn't really expand on. But everybody wants to feel something. Otherwise the experience isn't memorable. And then on top of it, the way that you create memories is to think about what your experience was like and how you felt with the people that were experiencing it with you. And I know that there are a lot of really great things that people can do for solo engagement, so solo travel, for example. But even then, there's always interaction. Even if that interaction is with strangers, you're creating a feeling and an experience with someone who's engaging with either your restaurant or your company or whatever. And then they're going to take those memories based on the community that they felt part of. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. 100%.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I'm a solo traveler. I don't like traveling with people at all. But the most memorable moments are exactly what you said, is those interactions that I have with locals, learning about their story, unexpected interactions, I think is the biggest thing. And those are the biggest memories that I have for sure. So you work particularly in experiences within organizations. So can you share a little bit about, what your background is and what you do?
Yeah. So I have a background specifically in small business.
Right.
So I have I have a good amount of corporate experience as well. But once I went down that small business path, it was like instant connection, love at first sight. And it was never my plan. I always thought I was a corporate girl, but once I got a taste of small business and how amazing the people are behind them and how hard they work and what goes into them. And I was raised in small business. Both of my parents were small business owners. So, I've kind of had small business in different pockets of my life, but I've always had a focus on the people. So when I did my MBA, I focused in human resources because I've always felt that however engaged the people are is going to dictate the success of the organization at any level. I mean, any size. Even if you are just, a one person operation, your level of engagement and dedication to your work is going to determine the outcomes of your business at the end of the year. So that's always been a really big focus of mine. I've taught college courses that were all in communication, so various types of communication. And I really feel that what I do is I work with small business leaders. I take the experience that I have being a past leader of an organization that had tremendous growth, which was one of the most fun things of my career. And I just share those experiences with them. And I try to give them a point of view of, okay, let's think about your future self. And how can we take a look at what your future self is wanting and produce that in the present and share some of those pieces, because it's kind of like almost like, since we're in the holiday timeframe, it's kind of like the ghost of Christmas future, where it's like, I've been through a lot of these experiences. So I want to take what I know, bring them back to the present and work with people. And a big piece of that is just how you communicate to your employees and to your clients. Communication is so huge and so powerful. And so yeah, go ahead.
No, and I just wanted to know, and the company that you've built now, what are the kind of things, who are the kind of clients that you work with?
Yeah, so right in the end of 2020, we built a company called Reverie, and we are organizational development specialists. We're consultants, and one of my favorite things about what we do is, when you hear consultant, a lot of times I think you imagine either like reduction in workforce or cutting costs or things like, because that's pretty typical of what consultants do. But that's really not what we do. Our niche is small business and small to medium-sized business. So what we do is we go in and work alongside a business owner, and we help them identify what's going on in their business. Do they need to grow? Do they need to break a plateau? Do they need to pivot? Does something need to change? Are they going through some kind of major transition? We really just saddle up and partner up with them. We get to know their whole team. And we don't just deliver, like an outline of, here's what we think you should do based on our findings. We actually stay there and help implement it. Right. So that then we help train them. And so what our goal is to take some of these really big things and help integrate them into the culture that they already have without disrupting it. So we look to be culture enhancers rather than coming in and flipping it completely and twisting the culture. Because a lot of times what you find in small business is there's quite a bit of that family feel that they really don't want to have it disrupted, and we understand that. We appreciate that. So Reverie goes in to really partner, find what they're really, really good at, help them do more of that, and then help them figure out how to balance out some of the things that either they don't do quite yet, or they're unsure of how to do, and put some of those things in, put those processes in.
And what's the employee size that you work with generally, the teams?
So that's a great question, because we have teams of all different sizes.
Okay.
But our average is usually somewhere between 30 and 40 employees.
Okay.
But I'm really excited, because one of the things that we found as we've been on this adventure for a year now,
Yeah.
is that there are quite a few of what we call micro businesses that exist within small business, within that category. And the micro business kind of just gets lumped into the small business group, and they're really, really underserved population. And a micro business is really someone that's got anywhere from like 1 to 6 employees, and does, probably a little over $1 million in revenue or under, but not much more. So then you start getting into the real small business category. And we had so many micro business owners coming to us. We just didn't have, resources or services. We're getting ready to launch in January because we want to solve this problem. So we're launching Rev, which is going to be a consulting platform in a group format for micro business owners, because so much of what we were talking about before with community, a lot of times the micro business owner does not have that same level of community or resource exposure as even a small business or mid-sized business. So we're going to solve that problem, and I'm really excited to do it.
Yeah, every time you speak about that program, I get really excited as well. I mean, there is such a huge difference between a 6-man team, a 6-woman team, as opposed to a staff of 40 employees. Like 40 employees is still a lot of employees, right? So there is a huge spectrum. The companies that you're working with, when you go in and you look at the employee experience that is their current reality, what do you see as potentially the gaps that are there, some trends of both maybe negative and positive traits? Like, what do you see in terms of the potential of the employee experience that's already there in place?
So usually when we go in, at least with the clients that we really work well with, there's already a great culture in place.
Okay.
And when I say culture, I just mean they're working so hard in small business, it really is sweat, blood, and tears. And when they have great people on their team, and a lot of times we go in and we just fall in love with our clients and their teams, because these are such great people and they work so hard and they want the best experience for the people that they're serving. And so when we get there, that is always like the heart of the organization, right? But one of the challenges is when you're working that hard and you're moving that fast to try to provide this high level, amazing experience and remain competitive, communication gets lost, and it's like, so one of the things that I've held on to from talking with you is you're such a thought leader on micro moments, like those little opportunities that you have. And when you're going too fast, if you haven't really sat and thought about it and prepared that ahead of time and made that part of your strategy, those are lost. Those are completely lost. And those are the little defining moments that are going to make or break an experience. And so though everyone feels the experience is amazing, and I'm sure that it is, that's one of the big areas where we know that when we go in right away, that we can start looking for some of those just little gaps in communication or planning due to the speed that everyone is running.
Yeah, I totally am on the same page with you in that, even from the point of view of, I've worked for companies before where they put across this incredible vision about their employees and their teams, and they they preach this incredible culture, which a lot of time does exist. But then when you're actually physically working there on a day-to-day basis, you don't get that same feeling. You get the same feeling when you're in that meeting or you're in that presentation and you're like, yeah, this is what we're all working towards, this incredible vision.
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day basis, I think a lot of times that doesn't actually materialize for the reason that you're saying, is that there's moments throughout the day that really are going to compound, could be good or bad, but they're going to compound and result in some form of an impact for each individual employee, right? So
Yeah.
creating micro moments are just incredibly important. But like you said, it is not a common thought like, oh, let's create as many opportunities as possible today for some micro moments for our employees. It's not, I mean, that's why I talk about it a lot, because I feel that communication format, even that conversation is quite rare, and it is very, very powerful if it's executed on. And so what are the strategies that you're using to collect your data, to get the feel of the company? Are you having conversations with like all the employees and all the management, or how do you go about actually starting that process with them?
Yeah. So yes and yes and yes. We are we will start off by talking with the ownership or the leadership. A lot of times it's, an owner occupied company that we're working with. So and we talk to all of the key stakeholders first, just to get an idea of what they feel is, maybe going on, and what they're really looking for in wanting to engage with us. And from there, we do surveys, and we do a pretty big launch, like kickoff meeting, where we go in and we meet everybody. Because, one of the things that, like, when you know what's going on in your mind, and you're there to help make everyone's world better and more exciting, that you don't even stop to think about the fact that maybe they're afraid of you and why you're there. So we learned that very early on, that we needed to come in and help them feel comfortable talking to us.
Because you're a
So that,
consultant, right?
yes, yes. And remember, consultants reduce the
I
workforce.
actually had a huge aversion to calling myself a consultant. I don't anymore.
Same.
But like, I did not want to call myself a consultant, because for me it had like a bit of a negative connotation to it, or I don't know, maybe negative's not the right word, but it wasn't the vibe that I wanted to go for. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting that you bring that up.
like suspect, right? So, but we go through and we do interviews, but throughout the whole process, we work very closely with anyone who's involved in the project. And depending on the size of the team, that could be a handful of them, or it could be all of them. And so it's important to us to build that relationship, so that we can make sure what we don't want to do is get surface level answers and start solving for those problems, when we all know the problems actually exist, like down here off camera. They go deep. And so we know that it's going to take us a couple times to get to where the problem is actually existing. So we do a lot of interviews, surveys, meetings, and just try and get as much face-to-face time as we possibly can.
And I would assume, just from my own experience, that there's probably quite a bit of a difference between conversations or perceptions from like the management team and then employees, right? And then you're kind of in there to maybe bridge that gap, to kind of align the two. And that leads, there's a question that I really, really wanted to ask you today, which is a perfect segue from that point. I think oftentimes we think about leadership culture of an organization, and potentially we think about the leadership team, the executive team, and then we think about employee experience. So you have your leadership experience, employee experience. Oftentimes we think about them as quite separate, two different areas of the business that need to potentially be looked at. Of course, in fact, they're all one. The employee experience is the overarching theme here, and we all have to be leaders in some way for us to be able to create an employee experience for every single person in the team. So I'd love to get your take on that real disparity, that gap between the leadership culture and the employee culture, and then maybe an example of how you're kind of trying to bridge that gap and bring that together.
Yeah. So I love that you bring this up, because that exists everywhere. So And again, it comes down to communication. Like, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but a lot of times there's questions of transparency, right? So you'll hear a lot of people, and I feel like this was like a really popular theme for a while, in the last probably 5 to 10 years, where everyone is like, open the books, let's be super transparent. And I think that in some cases, that's an excellent decision, and that makes so much sense. But I also think that sometimes a level of transparency that's too high can be quite burdensome to the employees. So, and again, I want to just remember that we're talking about experience, right? So, like, if I was talking about a different topic, I might say transparency is the only way to go. But when it comes to experience and that difference between leadership and employee cultures, I personally feel that there's this big, huge gray area, and then trying to fill it in is really a question of what level of transparency. And the reason why sometimes I think transparency can be burdensome is if you are, for example, in a company where you're really struggling and you put all of the struggles down to a group that really has no ability to impact it, to control it, to do anything, depending on what the struggle is, that produces just a level of anxiety and fear and sometimes, despair, where then they feel like there's nothing they can do, or they're being put in a position where they truly don't have control over their work environment, and it's a scary one. So there's that. But then I think on a much simpler level, there's also, you know, when you're in a leadership role, you want so badly to believe that everything you're doing is amazing.
Right.
Because you need to, because you work so hard. But in your mind, you're making decisions that a lot of times you don't recognize the bias in your decision making, and you assume decisions that you're making are wonderful across the board. And so if you're not truly hearing what that employee culture is saying up and commuting down, and then allowing for a two-way communication to happen, you could be making all of these amazing decisions and doing what you think is this wonderful thing for culture. You're totally missing the mark. Yeah. And a lot of times these are not big things either that people are looking for. These are really small things. And it goes back to what you talk about all the time when we talk again about micro moments, is people are really looking just for small things to be engaged and to be happy. And it's just really amazing that a lot of times that mark is missed. And it's nice because it's easy to fix.
Right. Yes. And I would add to that also that employees also want to have their reality understood. For the most part, for my entire career, have worked in companies where the head office is not in the same country as mine, whether it's been retail, whether it's been events, whether it's been entertainment, whether it's been travel. And no matter where I have worked, I have always found a huge gap in what we know as to be the reality on the forefront, on the ground, and what our head office believe actually happens. And because the decisions are coming from there, oftentimes it is incredibly frustrating because we don't feel that they understand our reality. And then on the flip side of that, they think that we're ignoring everything that they're asking us to do because we don't want to do it, because we don't believe that has any place in, it's not going to be effective, it's not going to work at all, because it has not been a discussion. It's been a decision across two different parties that there's not a common ground of understanding of what is the reality of the experience in between those two. So have you come across that? And is it really, I mean, from my point of view, it's really exactly what you were saying about communication. It's like, how can we sit down? How can you better understand what we're doing? How can you see where we're trying to make these decisions, and maybe how can we have different kinds of conversations and ask different questions so that we can now be in a more kind of supportive and collaborative environment?
Absolutely. A long time ago, I saw a company that, and I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think that this is pretty across the board. I think it's pretty common for companies to really put a lot of energy into understanding what the client wants. And so the company drives like a client or a customer culture, and they build this amazing experience for customers and clients, and they really pay attention when something comes through about what they're not liking or what they need, and spend a lot of time thinking about it and tweaking it and marketing to it. And I think that there's very little time and dedication to given to the employee experience.
Right.
So, like every once in a while, you'll see a company that does, a survey of the employee experience, or, has a feedback form that is actually very useful. But even then, a lot of times, because we're so busy focusing on that client and customer experience / culture, you get caught up in it, and you just don't have, a lot of times it's not, it's and I can't say that ever has been anyone that I've worked with who's ever said, I don't care how my employees feel, I don't want them to be happy here. They don't feel like that, of course.
And
But
I'm
it's
sure you
just,
wouldn't want to work with
no,
someone like that
that
either.
would not be our key client.
No. I
No,
don't know how
but
they would be in business, to be honest, if that was their mentality.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it comes down to time, because you're dedicating so much of your time and resources to one area that even a small shift in attention to the employee culture, because so like culture, this big, huge macro version of culture, right? You've got a lot of these little subcultures that exist within one organization. So you can have one group that's like thrilled and it's amazing and they love it. And then another little group or department where their subculture is in ruins. And so just being able to have your finger on the pulse. And in small business, it's hard, because big, huge companies a lot of times have departments dedicated to that. Small businesses, they don't. That's a luxury that they just don't have.
Right.
So trying to put something in there where there's a process that people are just dedicated to, so that as you're going through the speed of your day, you are thinking about it more than you would be, and you are taking a little bit of your time out to dedicate to the employee culture is
Right.
huge. Yep.
I would like to talk about, the last thing we would like to talk about is onboarding, because I have been in companies that have done the most incredible onboarding experiences ever, to the point where I was like, this is too much. But in hindsight, it definitely wasn't, and it was incredible. And then conversely, companies that I've just kind of been like thrown in and been like, okay, figure it out, see you, bye. And so I feel like I've experienced as an employee the entire spectrum. And the teams that I love to work with the most are very short-term teams. So they could be seasonal teams, they could be smaller event style teams, they could be there just for 1 week, they could be there for 3 months, because onboarding, that's usually when the break in onboarding happens, because everything's so quick and we don't have enough time, and you just need to be good like now. And when I worked at Cirque du Soleil, we only had our teams for 2 months. So my onboarding involved a 2 to 3 hour training, and then we would have the premiere of the show that evening. So it was an incredibly quick transition, and I had to find the most effective way to get them ready from a skill set point of view, which that was probably the easier part, but from a mindset, vision point of view, how I want the experience to actually roll out. So when you're going into these companies, what are you finding in terms of the onboarding experiences? Are you finding a lot of trends in, like it's not really a priority, we don't, they'll figure it out? Or are you finding that because they're a smaller business and the team is smaller, that there's actually a lot more intentionality and there's a lot more time given to that part of the employee experience?
I'm so glad you asked me this question, because if I had to pick, I think that building onboarding process is my absolute favorite project that I ever get to work on.
Yeah, me too,
Because
actually. That's funny.
really,
Yeah,
that's
I
not
love it.
right. Because it's so important.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, yes, you hit the nail on the head with everything that you said. When you're a smaller company, you have time to be able to dedicate to each person, because you're
Right.
bringing maybe one person on every once in a while. Maybe if you're lucky, when you're really small, you might be lucky to bring on 1 or 2 people per year.
Mhm.
So what we find though is when we're going into, like our average client who's now at this place where they are hiring 1 to 2 people per month, or
Right.
3 to 4 people per quarter, and there are so many moving pieces. A lot of times it's they're still operating from that like organic, let's bring them in and get them started, and it just simply can't work like that anymore,
Mhm.
because there are now so many layers to the leadership. And so you need that message to trickle down, and everyone has a totally different way of interpreting the message
Yeah.
if it's not super in front of your face and like drilled into you, so um I don't think I've come across anyone, I'm like really scanning my brain, who has said we don't want an onboarding experience. But I've come across several that haven't gotten there yet, because and that's one of the things with small business. You just kind of it kind of builds around you. It's like this organic thing that's as soon as you like blink, because when you were trying to build it, it just wouldn't happen fast enough.
Mhm.
Like when you're at that place where you're in a micro business, all you want is like to build it. Well, once you get to that level, it's building itself, because there are now people that are helping with that mission. And all of a sudden you've got something bigger than you. And so then it's kind of just becomes like this organic thing that just happens.
Right.
It's usually very disorganized. People are usually
Yes.
getting thrown in. They don't have, like, they're not being given information. They don't even know who's who, or who to ask questions to, or where do they sit? How do they figure
Mhm.
out where the paper clips are? I know that sounds
Yeah.
crazy, but all of these things matter. When you add all of this stuff up, it matters. And onboarding is so important, because talent acquisition and getting talent to believe in your company enough where they want to work for you is one of the most important things that a leadership team can do. So when you get that talent and they're on board with you and they are coming in, and you give them this like very bad first impression with a very poor or non-existent onboarding, that says something. So our goal is to build just an amazing experience that's not all show, right? Because one thing that you said that I feel like is so important, that sometimes when someone has this like amazing onboarding, it needs to be functional and it needs to be technical. People have to be learning something.
Right.
They can't just be there to be like an observer of a show. They need to actually be starting to get ingrained and start learning and start acclimating and going through kind of this process where it's like they're building, like you don't want to push them into the deep end, but you also don't want a full 2 weeks to go by where they really haven't done anything. So it needs to be this like perfect combination of technical, functional, and just like amazing culture display. So having materials for them, having swag for them that's got your brand on it, making them feel like you have prepared for them, you're excited for them to be there. Like all of those things really matter. And that's the first introduction to your company, and is going to tell them like, do I believe in this? Am I on board with this? Do I understand? Do I feel confident in the new decision I've just made? Because a lot of times people are coming somewhere they've left somewhere else that they are probably very comfortable.
Right.
And we all know change is very, very unsettling for a lot of people. So they're already sort of second guessing themselves just from like a psychological standpoint. Like, did I make the right decision? So you want them to come in and just know right away. And onboarding is the only way you're going to be able to do that.
Let's give a little bit of practicality now. If we have a CEO watching right now, a business owner, and they're sitting here, they've listened the last 30 minutes and they're like, I don't really know what my company culture is. I've never really thought about it. I don't know kind of how I'm doing as a leader. I think my employees are fantastic. There's definitely room for improvement, but I'm not really sure. So what are maybe like 2 or 3 things that the owner or the CEO can do right now on their own, let's say, to really start getting that deeper insight into the employee culture, the employee experience that they have in their brand, and the actual one, not the one that they think is
Yeah.
present, right?
Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of challenging. I definitely recommend using, if you're really, really serious about it, especially like if you feel like there might be a problem or if you're going through a culture identity crisis, because that happens. So,
Right.
if someone who is really important to the company leaves, for example, your team might be going through an identity crisis with their culture. They might be questioning, should they leave? So those things happen. I would really recommend bringing in a third party to talk to your people, because they're going to most of the time in small business to mid-sized business, they have a relationship with that CEO or that leader. They're grateful to them for the employment opportunity, and they like what they're doing and they believe in their vision. They don't want to share real feedback sometimes because they don't want to come across as you know hurtful, for lack of a better
Ungrateful,
word.
or yeah.
Yeah. So a third party can really help with that, to extract that real information. Okay. But if that's not an option, it's not an option for everybody.
Right.
So if that's not an option, one of the things that I always want to remind the CEOs, the owners, leaders, whatever, at any level, is like, if there's something that you really, really feel like you want to understand or know or change or, shift, look at what your demeanor, your behavior, your actions are when you're in front of your people. Because culture is, a lot of times, especially in small companies, a lot of it is influenced by the behaviors and actions of the person who's leading the charge. So if you're a leader that's coming in every day afraid and making fear-based decisions and saying no to everything and high anxiety, that's what your culture is going to reflect. And your people are going to feel that, and they're going to reflect it, and they're going to feel like they're on eggshells, and that's how your culture is going to seem. If you are if you come in and some days you're really happy, but then other days you blow up and you're mad and you show your emotion that way, and it's really hard to know what to expect, your culture is going to reflect that. So thinking about what you want it to feel like for people and how you want it to be, and then recognize that you are always on, you are always performing, someone is always watching. And so again, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the level of transparency. Like, as a CEO or as a leader, owner, your job is not to just like take all of that emotion and stuff it, you know? But you need to have like one trusted person or a mentor or a coach or an advisor, maybe even someone outside of your company that gets all of that,
Right.
because then they can actually help you to figure out how to unpack it a little bit. Your employees are not going to be able to serve in that position. So when you come in and you're sharing all of these things with them that they don't have control or influence over, that's going to impact the culture. So I would recommend just like being very, very aware of how you're presenting with that culture. Also, the other piece of it is knowing what you want and then being consistent. There is nothing worse than saying, I'm going to do this. We're going to do this recognition, and I'm going to do it every time we have a meeting. And then you do it once or twice, and then it goes away. Or you say, I'm going to, provide an event for our employees because it really matters to me that we have team building, and then it never gets planned. So if like, do what you say you're going to do and then remain consistent with it. Don't let it fizzle out, because that will also contribute to.
Yeah, and it goes to your credibility as well, right? Like I experienced that in a positive way. I rolled out a 5 to 10 minute leadership meeting before at Cirque du Soleil before we opened our doors to the public every night, and I think I missed one because I wasn't there, but every single night I did this meeting 5 to 10 minutes, and it was called the 640 because it was at 640. So nobody had any excuses of oh, I didn't know what time it was. The meeting is called the 640 for that reason. But I saw the benefits of that consistency very, very, very quickly. I mean, I did this. This was in Vancouver, Canada. We were there for 3 months, which is quite long for a Cirque du Soleil. Usually it's 6 to 8 weeks. And I saw the benefits of that immediately, like within the first 2 weeks. And I made a point. It was one of my biggest goals of that city, is to do that every single night. No matter what was happening. And for the most part, we did. And the results were really massive. So I think consistency, is important just in terms of that, from a behavioral point of view, that habit building in terms of the experience, but then also you as the leader, like you were saying, building that credibility and awareness around your vision and what you're trying to achieve. I'd just like to finish with, you did touch on earlier, but the program that you are launching right now, can you share with us again, what is it, who's it for, and then how people can apply, how can they get in touch with you if they're interested to be a part of it?
Great, thanks. Yeah. So I just can't even tell you how excited we are. It's called Rev by Reverie. It's on our website, which is findreverie.com. And I'm excited for what this is going to look like. Obviously, this is our going to be our first ever session, and it's a quarter. It's a quarter long, and we're going to meet weekly. It's all virtual. It's for the micro to small business owner. So anyone that's a solopreneur or has a small team, who I would also say they need to be of the growth mindset. A lot of micro businesses intend to exist just to remain as a micro business. I think it could be helpful for them as well, just to be able to have that level of organization. But everything that we're going to be doing is meant to build scalability within your business, to help you grow from the very beginning, to put those good habits in as you are starting out. So that way, as you keep going, you're already putting some of those really great, foundational pieces in to make your growth happen faster and a little smoother. We're going to cover topics like, accounting, expenses. How do I plan for expenses? What should they look like? A lot of times people know they need to spend some money, but they don't know how much they should be spending. So putting together, that budget. It might be HR type things. It might be, a good intro to onboard, so that you can start thinking about what your onboarding could look like. It might be digital media, how to start using some of the platforms to really get your brand out there. So our goal is to look at the whole business. So from, accounting, marketing, public relations, project management, the executive level, strategic planning. So leadership, we want to cover, we want to cover our bases all the way through, so that people have exposure and have good takeaways. Every meeting that we have, someone is going to have something that is applicable to their business that they've worked on, that they can take and apply right then and there.
And if somebody is listening to this and they were like, oh my gosh, who is this Lindsay? I want to connect with her. What's the best way for them to connect with you? Where can they find you?
So I'm everywhere, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. Yeah. And, if somebody wanted to put comments in the section of your video or anything like that, I know if I don't see it, I trust you will. And you'll share it with me. But I'm happy to talk with anyone. I truly believe in the connection with people and the community. So regardless of what that looks like or what that ends up as, I am always interested in helping anyone I possibly can.
Well, Lindsay, this has been incredible. You and I both love to talk about employee experience and leadership in organizations. But we're going to wrap it up there. I just want to once again thank you so much for being part of the Premier Month. It is an honor to have you on. And I really want to take my hat off to you and thank you so much for being an incredible experience creator.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm probably one of your biggest fans. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And to everyone watching, thank you. We hope that you have enjoyed this video and we will see you on the next episode. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of The Experience Creators. Both Lindsay and myself hope that you really found this episode valuable, that you found it enjoyable, that you really got a lot out of it. Please let us know in the comments below if you did. Make sure also to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications so that you know when the next guest graces the Experience Creators stage. If you would like to join the Experience Creators community, please sign up for our weekly newsletter in the description box below. And don't forget that one great experience can change someone's world.